I was very against the idea of not having Bitcoin and buying treasury companies. That changed a little bit in, I think, probably November, December last year. And I actually got into strategy because I was like, okay, I want to. The same with cryptocurrencies. I started with the biggest one. I did with the other ones, and then like pivoted back to the biggest one. And I just like have the same approach now to like treasury companies. I was like, I want to first understand strategy, and I'm not yet done. But every time I mention strategy, every time I talk about strategy, everyone is telling me, "Oh, you also have to look at Metaplanet." Like you have to, like, it seems like, just like from my small subjective feeling, Metaplanet is like number 2 treasury company that I kind of have to look at. I don't know the stats and all of that. I just know strategy is number 1. But like, it's just from a feeling and like a narrative perspective. People always tell me like, also look at Metaplanet. First of all, like, why do you think this is? And like, do you agree that like Metaplanet has a really unique stand in the treasury space because it's like Japan and like has a very unique kind of market to it?
Yes, I think, right now Metaplanet is the largest Bitcoin treasury in Asia, and Strategy in the US has, over 700,000 Bitcoin. We currently have 35,000 Bitcoin and counting. And what's really unique about Metaplanet is that we are in, the Japanese market, which is one of the largest markets in the entire world. And the Japanese market is just historically very, very challenging for foreign companies to break into. And so, yes, we have a very good head start in Japan currently. The other piece about Japan is over the last, 20 or 30, actually it's probably 30 to 40 years at this point, it's the yield that people have been able to generate has been extremely low. So in a typical Japanese money market fund, you might get 0.5% interest for saving in that. And in the Japanese savings accounts, the interest is essentially 0. And so it's a very kind of yield-starved environment, and Bitcoin, is offering significant volatility, to say the least. It over the long term has increased tremendously, but in the short term and day to day can be a very volatile asset to hold. So it's just very unique in that jurisdiction, and I do think that Metaplanet, we have a great head start. Now there are actually a bunch of new kind of Bitcoin treasury companies that are starting to pop up in Japan. But yeah, if you're looking at the Japan scene, we're significantly larger than the others.
Yeah, that's interesting. Maybe a question I should have started with, especially for people that don't know what Metaplanet is or what they're doing, or maybe are also new to the Bitcoin treasury space. What is Metaplanet doing in terms of accumulating Bitcoin? Yeah, like just like give us a high level overview of like what Metaplanet actually is doing.
Well, we're following a lot of Michael Saylor's playbook, but we're deviating in some really important ways. So we actually have a kind of Bitcoin income generation team that allows us to earn revenue as we are accumulating Bitcoin. So we are running a similar playbook, selling equity to acquire Bitcoin. In the near future, we hope to launch preferred stocks like STRC and STRK in the US that will provide a higher percentage of yield to Japanese savers with reduced volatility. And on top of that, since we are kind of a unique company in Japan, and Bitcoin adoption and education is a little bit further behind some of the other places in the world, we also have great Bitcoin education and events. So we recently acquired the bitcoin.jp domain, where we have a series of excellent beginner, intermediate, and advanced Bitcoin education articles. We just announced this week that we are hosting our annual shareholder meeting at the end of March in Tokyo at a massive arena. So it's essentially a conference, but it is just the Metaplanet shareholder meeting plus an event we're calling the Japan Bitcoin Future Forum. The Japan Bitcoin Future Forum is open to the public, and the AGM, our shareholder meeting, is open to verified shareholders. So if you are a shareholder, even if you're outside of Japan, you can register on our platform and sign up, see if you can go to the event. But yeah, we kind of combined not just the Bitcoin accumulation, but we combined that with education, resources, and we have some big plans for this year and next year to expand on that even further.
It's so interesting because I feel like treasury companies in such a bridging moment of the fiat world to the Bitcoin world. And I don't know, I think we've talked about that in previous podcasts, probably more, of like, we are going into this Bitcoin world and there has to be some kind of bridge to it. There has to be some kind of like things where we can get into that. And I'm like, strategy is a lot in my mind because like I'm researching that at the moment. Stretch is such an interesting product just because like every person I tell you about that is not into Bitcoin. Like every person I tell about that is like, wait, you get 11%? Like, how can I invest? Like it's crazy. I think if this product, and the only catch is always like, oh, but is it risky? And like, can I trust it and all of that? Because they don't trust Bitcoin, they don't trust strategy, because the trust just has to build. But once there is the trust there, like the funnel of fiat money coming into the system, being converted to Bitcoin, that's I think it could be completely absurd, the numbers that all the treasury companies, not all, the good executed treasury companies, I will put it like that, can make, is absurd. I'm not yet done with my research, but the more I look into it, the more impressed I am with the whole space.
Agreed. You know, the products that Saylor are bringing to the market are extremely innovative, and they're so powerful because they're supercharged with Bitcoin at the end of the day. To provide some context, so we're in the process of setting up some similar products. We've named them Mars and Mercury. And to your point, like your friends are very shocked by 10, 11, 12% interest that's being paid by STRC and some of the other preferreds. That interest rate is at least in the US, it's about 2 to 3x what you might be able to get in a standard investment. In Japan, our offerings, we're targeting, when we announce Mercury and Mars, something like 4.9% interest. And as I mentioned, Japan is so yield starved that even the money market funds are at 0.5% interest. So that's like nearly a 10x difference in the amount of interest that you might be able to earn, which I think is just a tremendous opportunity. So the opportunity in Japan is just so massive, even compared to the massive opportunity that is available in the rest of the world with these tools that Saylor is creating.
That's freaking awesome. Mars and Metaplanet, and then there's like Mars and Macro. I love the naming. And so those will be preferred stocks that pay a yield, basically in a similar fashion than Strive, Stretch, and Strike, and all of those do.
Correct. And we're starting with the two that are most similar to STRK and STRC. So yes, we'll start with those and see how that goes, and we'll see what happens in the future.
I really enjoy that. That will be fun to see. What is kind of for you? There's a lot of people that criticize treasury companies in the Bitcoin space. It's kind of fun to watch. It's almost like two different communities. And I come from a place of being like a hardcore self-custody maxi. And I think you come also from the same place, working at Unchained, and like being super like a focus on like self-custody and all of that. How do you see currently this like almost like weird differentiation with like there's like a real Bitcoin I have self-custody, but then there's like the treasury company space? I feel like I'm in both camps at this point. Like I would never have like a significant amount of my money not in Bitcoin self-custody, but at the same time I like the products and I can imagine investing a little bit in there to have some amplified Bitcoin. So how do you kind of see this almost cultural difference, the cultural aspect of those two elements?
What's great about Bitcoin, and particularly Bitcoin, 10-ish years ago, 7 to 10 years ago, is that we felt like we rediscovered savings, and we did in a lot of ways. Bitcoin is sound money. There's a fixed supply of 21 million. There will never be Bitcoin printed beyond that, and you do have the power to save it very easily by controlling the keys. And myself personally, I would not for my savings wouldn't trust them with a custodian. I only use multi-sig with keys geographically separated, so that myself, my family, my house are never single points of failure for my Bitcoin, and I'm able to travel the world and be able to access my wealth kind of wherever I need to be able to access it. So that's the power of saving in Bitcoin. Now, it's my belief that Bitcoin is the new global reserve currency, it's the new form of money for the entire world. And saving is maybe the most important thing you can do with your money, but that's not the only thing that you can do with money. Bitcoin is not going to remove the desire or need for investing. Bitcoin allows you to invest in purchase, acquire more capital, invest in your own business, invest in other businesses. And so there's a lot of people who are still kind of excited about the savings aspect of Bitcoin, and myself included. But there's an entirely different category of people who are interested in investing in different companies. And as a longtime Bitcoin holder, you just have to ask yourself, well, am I going to invest in companies that don't have good money, or am I going to invest in companies that do have good money? And right now, the treasury companies they've figured out a sly roundabout way to significantly increase Bitcoin's total addressable market into these, fixed income credit markets. And it's a black hole. Bitcoin just, starts draining the kind of legacy fiat markets and turns it into sound money and kind of hijacks that whole system. So I see them as extremely valuable. They open up the total addressable market of Bitcoin to these massive, massive pools of capital that are allocated by institutional investors with very specific mandates. Like, these people can't use the funds to buy Bitcoin directly, but they can potentially use the funds to buy preferred equity or common equity. So yeah, I think it's ultimately just a sign of Bitcoin maturing and evolving. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with just saving in Bitcoin. It's the lowest risk activity that you can do in Bitcoin. Control the keys to your Bitcoin in multi-sig and just hold for the long term. That's the lowest risk thing you can do. But for some folks, they want to, maybe affect change in the world in a different way. And the way that they can do that is by investing. And so that's where the Bitcoin treasury companies come into play. And it's just another option. The way that they trade right now, in my view, is like a very amplified version of Bitcoin. The preferred stocks are suppressed volatility versions of Bitcoin. You still get some of the yield, but you don't get all of the yield. It's just really cool, I think, to see how the industry is evolving. I don't think that it is losing. A lot of people are worried that the Bitcoin treasury companies are causing Bitcoin to lose its roots of sovereignty and control. And I don't believe that that's necessarily true. I think it's just a sign, again, of longtime Bitcoin holders who are interested in using some of their savings as investments.
Yeah, it's an interesting era, because if we sometimes want to be so pure to say, if I only like you if you buy Bitcoin and agree with all my values. So we are even attacking people that are buying Bitcoin. It's kind of like I'm strongly of the belief that every Bitcoin adoption is good Bitcoin adoption, even if it might be in Bitcoin ETF. We have the same discussion with the Bitcoin ETF. Is it good or bad? Is it centralizing? End of the day, I think it provided a good thing, and it didn't centralize Bitcoin. Now there's this talk of what if Saylor or treasury companies and ETFs and Coinbase own a very large amount of Bitcoins, and I can see that point to a certain degree. It's also fun, I think, there was, I think yesterday actually, or like even today, Saylor asked about in a poll of like, how do you hold your Bitcoin? And there was this whole thing with like James and Lobb brought it up with like, how can you be sure like the strategy is not rehypothecating Bitcoin? It's a complicated word for me, which I'm like, comparing a publicly traded company that has been in a stock market for so long to something like an FTX is a big stretch. I feel like.
I don't think it's necessarily the wrong question to ask, and I absolutely agree that there are additional risks to investing in Bitcoin treasury companies or companies that hold Bitcoin. There are additional risks than there are to just holding spot Bitcoin and saving in it. But that's kind of the opportunity there, right? You have to, I think the fiat world has kind of has meshed together this idea of investing versus savings, and what we're used to is exclusively investing and feeling like that is the least risky and safest thing to do. Bitcoin really, in my mind, decouples the two between saving and investing. Saving is the low risk activity, controlling the keys to your Bitcoin. It's still going to be volatile because Bitcoin is still, in my view, very young. But if you're trying to get involved with Bitcoin in some way, buying spot Bitcoin, controlling the keys is the lowest risk way that you can do it. But as you go out on the risk spectrum, that becomes the investment opportunity. If you're buying something like a strategy or a Metaplanet, you are buying it because you believe that the management team will be able to generate more Bitcoin, more money than you will be able to by just saving it. So that's where the opportunity is. Maybe it's a little basic, but it really helps me to go back to those first principles of the differences between saving and investing. Another thing to note about the treasury companies, and in particular Metaplanet, is we found that we are actually the kind of first Bitcoin touch that many people have in Japan. And many of our shareholders go on to buy spot Bitcoin as well. So we're leading the charge in a lot of ways in Japan by introducing Bitcoin. And then, of course, we have, like I mentioned earlier, our educational materials, and Bitcoin Magazine Japan is run by Metaplanet as well. And so we're really getting people into the Bitcoin ecosystem. And maybe it's not everyone's first choice for a first introduction, but sometimes you have to just put yourself in someone else's shoes who's maybe used to only investing, and they're at least getting their first touch with Bitcoin, and it's a positive first touch. So it's brought in a ton more people, more money, more people into the Bitcoin ecosystem. You mentioned earlier the Bitcoin ETFs. I think that the Bitcoin ETFs have been absolutely great for Bitcoin. It has led some of the most powerful people in the entire world to become advocates for Bitcoin. Larry Fink now announced that their ETF is their highest revenue generating product, their Bitcoin ETF. That sentence would have been pretty insane to say just like 5 or 6 years ago. And so, yeah, the world is changing very rapidly, and Bitcoin is growing in a lot of ways faster than I even imagined. Now, the price can be, the day-to-day spot price can be a little bit painful, but I remain incredibly bullish. And yeah, the amount of impact that Bitcoin has had in the world in just my time has been truly amazing.
The first thing that every Bitcoiner does, and the most important activity that every Bitcoiner keeps on doing, is buying Bitcoin. And I personally use Relay to buy and sometimes also spend or sell my Bitcoin. And there are two main reasons why I do so. The first one is it's Bitcoin only. They do not do any shit coins. They do not do any cryptos, any stocks, or anything else. This is a tool, an app that is fully focused only and solely on Bitcoin. The second one is self-custody. They give you the keys to your Bitcoin the moment you buy them. You never give them the control over your Bitcoin, and you don't have to trust them because you can verify that you and only you have the keys to your Bitcoin. There's no third-party risk. There's no freezing of your assets. There's no rug pulling. There's nothing of that. Download Relay, the app, on your phone, or go to relay.app on your browser and use code Robin to save fees and get cheaper Bitcoin. I want to tell you about something very special to me. It's called micro-seed. If you hold your Bitcoin in self-custody, and you should, you know how critical it is to secure your seed phrase. You should not have them on paper. You should not have them on anything else than titanium. With micro-seed, you can engrave your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, the entire seed phrase, onto a 1-inch small washer. Yes, just one washer. All 24 words on that one washer. You can hide that thing everywhere. And even better, you don't need to buy a new kit every time you have to get a new wallet. You can make unlimited backups because microseed is not selling the washer. Microseed is selling the device that stamps the washer. So you get the full kit with the device, with the washers, with the hammer, with everything you need to get started today, and you can make with that unlimited amount of backups. Go now to microseed.io.